The idea for today's video came from an article on Mets Junkies from my man Jem, and it was talking about the Mets potentially making a move for Kris Bryant. I will leave the article in the description. I encourage you guys to check it out because Jem really talks about why the Mets may be looking to trade for Bryant and why the Cubs want to get rid of him, because this is something that the Cubs do want to do. The Cubs, like a lot of other teams in Major League Baseball right now, are looking to offload salary, and with Kris Bryant agreeing to a $19 million contract in arbitration, that's a lot of money on the books that the Cubs really don't want to keep because Bryant is on the last year of his deal. In this video, I'm going to go over why I think the Mets should possibly consider making a move for Kris Bryant in case they don't sign George Springer, because that is not a guarantee. I think that the Mets do want to make a move at third base because Sandy also has not raved about J.D. Davis so far in this offseason, with a couple of the actions that the Mets have made recently, which I want to get into later. If you like this video, me going over a particular player and should the Mets trade for them and what could that possible trade package look like, make sure to leave a like, comment. Would you like to make a trade for Kris Bryant? I really would like to get your guys' take and just see what other Met fans think about potentially bringing in Kris Bryant to be the third baseman. The thing to consider about Kris Bryant is that's another guy you're probably going to have to extend, and it's not going to be cheap to give Kris Bryant a long-term deal. And then you could press subscribe. We hit 900 subscribers, so now we are working our way to the big one, the 1,000. So I really would appreciate if you guys could subscribe, and if you are already, please tell a friend because I really appreciate it. It makes recording and editing and all that fun stuff, makes it worth it, and I love talking to you guys in the comment section. So let's talk about Jem's article and just the Mets' overall pursuit of Kris Bryant. So Jem mentions that the Mets do want an upgrade at third base. I mean, you heard Sandy Alston talk about it. He kind of ducked around the question about J.D. Davis being the starting third baseman. He wouldn't fully commit to it. Sandy kind of alluded to that the Mets could have a different third baseman on opening day. That's not set in stone that it is going to be J.D. Davis. So I do think that the Mets are at least exploring the third base market because guys like Arenado and Bryant are out there. I think Kris Bryant is a lot more realistic because he is much cheaper than Nolan Arenado, so I'm sure the Mets are definitely taking that into consideration. Another interesting move by the Mets is that during arbitration, the one player they did not come to an agreement with was J.D. Davis. J.D. Davis looking for $2.4 million. Mets countered at $2.1 million, and now they're going to have an arbitration hearing just off of $300,000. With this new ownership and all the other deals that the Mets were able to make during arbitration, that they should be able to get this deal done unless they don't feel highly about J.D. Davis. For some reason, I'm starting to get the feeling that the Mets indeed do not feel high about J.D. Davis and that they may be looking to trade him or just have someone take his spot because that was a Brody trade. I believe that Sandy wants to keep his guys and not necessarily keep Brody's guys. That is just the kind of vibe that I've gotten so far. I think that since J.D. Davis was a Brody trade, that Sandy Alston doesn't really have that much emotional attachment to J.D. Davis and is like, this isn't my guy anyway, I'll just get rid of him and get us a new third baseman. Whether that's Kris Bryant or somebody else. Between Sandy not really, standing up for J.D. Davis being like, no, this is our third baseman, and the way they handled J.D. Davis' contract in arbitration makes me think that they may not want him to be the third baseman. Jem mentions Junior Santos as a guy that would be going back to the Cubs in this kind of deal because the Cubs, I mean, they're just looking to get rid of salary and get prospects. And after trading away Isaiah Green and Josh Wolf, Junior Santos is now in the top 10 Mets prospects. So, I mean, you would be giving up a top 10 prospect, but not one of those untouchables that we talked about before, where, those big-time top 5, top 6 guys. Even other good prospects like Vientos and Zapuki, you wouldn't be putting them in the deal either. Jem also mentions possibly putting Ali Sanchez in this trade. Ali Sanchez makes sense because the Cubs are potentially looking at moving Wilson Contreras, so that could be another player going back in the deal. And then, I mean, if you want to get rid of J.D. Davis anyway, you don't want him to be your third baseman, and the Cubs might be looking for a cheap third baseman just to play right now, just still have a competitive team because they don't play in the greatest division in the world. Maybe put J.D. Davis in that trade as well. So, I mean, if you make a trade of Junior Santos plus Ali Sanchez plus J.D. Davis, it's unclear what else the Cubs would want. I know that when the Mets were originally talking to the Cubs, they really asked about Francisco Alvarez because, like I said, they're looking to move Contreras. But I'm not putting Alvarez in a trade for Kris Bryant. I mean, there is no way it's happening. And I really don't want to go into any of these untouchable guys for Kris Bryant. It's something like, you know what? Well, it's supposed to be a salary dump. We'll give you a top 10 prospect at Santos. We'll give you a starting third baseman in J.D. Davis. And we'll give you another catcher for when you potentially get rid of Wilson Contreras. Because the Cubs also got rid of Victor Caratini in the Yu Darvish trade. So, I mean, they could use another catcher. If I'm the Mets, third base isn't the biggest need in the world because I think that J.D. Davis probably could get the job done. Notice how J.D. Davis so far is going to be the number 7 hitter for the Mets this year compared to where he was the number 3 hitter far too often in 2020. And he did a good job offensively in 2019, so maybe we'll see that again from J.D. Davis and that he can be a good offensive bat. He had some nice plays at third base in 2020, so, I mean, he could be the starting third baseman, but it just seems to me that the Mets don't really want him to be the starting third baseman. Since I'm already putting J.D. in this trade, I don't want to put Dom Smith there. I don't want to put Brandon Nimmo. I'm not putting in any of the untouchable prospects. I know everybody wants to move Familia's money, and so do I, but if the Cubs are looking to get rid of money and they're going to get rid of somebody of Kris Bryant's caliber, why would you want to take Jeurys Familia back? Now, Bryant, like a lot of other players, had a down year in 2020, but I mean, at this point, you can't really worry about that because Lindor had a down year in 2020, so do you not want Francisco Lindor anymore because he had a down year? I mean, as time has progressed, the analytics have not done Bryant any favors. They show that he's hitting the ball not as hard, he's not barreling it up as frequently when you look at the analytics, so that does concern you a little bit because the guy still is so young, and the fact that those kind of numbers are going down already definitely is a bit of concern. And the only reason why the Mets should look at Kris Bryant is if they're unable to sign George Springer, because they said it again today that the Mets and Blue Jays have both made $100 million offers to George Springer, and it's up to him. Does he want to go to Canada or does he want to be close to home with the Mets? There's a report that George Springer prefers to play close to home, which is Connecticut. Steve Cohen's from Connecticut. Mets aren't too far from Connecticut, so it would make sense that Springer wants to be a Met, but the Mets don't want to give him his asking price. They're not going to give him 175, and I don't think they're going to give him 150 either. Are they going to go 6 years? Would they go 7 years? I wouldn't, because even in a 5-year deal, you're still only getting 2 to 3 years in center field from George Springer, so why would you go a 6th or 7th year? So if the Mets are unable to get George Springer, and if they're not able to get Brad Hand either, I mean, you still have this around $30 million left to spend. What else are you going to do with it? You're not going after Bauer. LeMahieu's off the board, so what other big-time players are really out there? Because like I said, if you don't get Brad Hand, I mean, you have a bunch of relievers that are available, but they're not going to cost you a lot of money. And then if you were to get Jackie Bradley or Kevin Pillar, they're not going to cost a lot of money. You still have money left over. So would the Mets be willing to, renegotiate with the Cubs? Because this was something that they were considering before the Francisco Lindor trade. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something that they could pursue, down the road. Because if the Cubs really want to get rid of that salary, the Mets are one of the very few teams that are willing to take it on. It would be a trade that could happen, and it definitely would upgrade the Mets team because Kris Bryant is better than J.D. Davis. I mean, there's no other way about it. I think for me, if I'm not getting Springer and I'm not getting Brad Hand, I wouldn't mind doing a Kris Bryant trade. I mean, would I still have enough money maybe for like a Kevin Pillar or just a defensive replacement center fielder? We really need to know about the DH. The DH is going to decide everything. What concerns me is that if there's no DH and the Mets do want to get a center fielder, whether that's Springer or somebody else, where does Dom Smith play? Because if he doesn't, I almost rather just get no center fielder, have Nimmo out there, have Dom out there, and then just sign one of these other guys like even a Jake Marisnick just to be a late game defensive replacement. And if that's the case, then I'd be much more willing to upgrade third base, get another big time bat in Kris Bryant, get another pitcher or whatever, and we're ready to go. We'll see if the Mets get Springer or they pursue other avenues and what those other avenues may be. But again, I really want to hear your guys' take on this and if you would want to bring Kris Bryant to the Mets and what kind of trade package you'd be looking to do. I really want to hear your guys' feedback on that. So until the next one, be safe, be smart, be healthy, and let's go Mets.